This is our third review, and the last time we were here, we heard your comments clearly, and I came away with what I identify as three primary issues that we need to address today. The first is the compatibility with the adjacent historic landmark, which you all had a straw vote on. The second is the market design. The third is the modulation along Victoria. And the fourth is the proximity and relationship to the Arlington, specifically those paseos. So I'm going to start with the compatibility with the adjacent landmark, and I'm going to weave that throughout this presentation. So the Arlington is obviously the key element here, and you can see as we look at the corner of Victoria and State how it is how the foreground of one- and two-story buildings that we know along State Street. And as we take a journey around the site, we can begin to see how the different sizes of buildings affect the view up towards the Arlington. Obviously, this very important building, the Christian Science Reading Room, is one- and two-story. And when you go along the side there, you can see that the two-story portion, virtually blocks the view, and as it ascends or descends down into one story, you have more view. And then, of course, as is the case with all things, as you travel along, views open up and close depending on what the vantage point is. In this case, the opening where the loading zone is, or the loading dock for the old Safeway, creates an opening. And then along when we look at the building, the one-story portion of the existing building, you can see basically blocks all but the upper portion of the Arlington. And, of course, there are the famous or perhaps infamous Joe Knowles murals. And here you can even see that a mechanical screen that's at the height of a 1.5 or 2-story building would completely block the view of the Arlington. So I cut this section through the design that we're going to be showing you today. And by the way, in the process of revising these drawings, which we'll have hard copies for you to review after I finish the slideshow, we have done everything we can to lower the three-story massing as much as possible. It's very important to Marge, our client, that the residential units, because they are very small, most of these units are less than 900 square feet, have decent-sized ceilings, which we've identified as at least 9.5-foot ceiling heights, and so that's what we are shooting for. But the project is designed right now to be below 40 feet. But if we transpose the Vaughns, the one thing that we know is that when viewed from across the street, a one-story building basically creates that view corridor. And Pam and Tim in their report, which you reviewed the last time, talked about the view corridors or view passages through. So keeping that in mind then, and that of course is what that view angle affords, keeping that in mind when we look at the project as designed, what we understand is that one story at the street blocks the same amount of view that 2 stories back several feet would block, and 3 stories set back even further. And what this is illustrating is essentially a view topography. Now, obviously, if you have a 2-story building that is on Victoria, you're going to lose that view, as I showed you in those photos. So a 2-story condition essentially blocks the view of the Arlington. So thinking about that view topography, what we establish here are 1, 2, and 3-story lines, which is what we have tried to follow in terms of the massing of the project. And I'll get back to that in a little bit, just continuing around the site. I hope that we can all agree that this building is not compatible with your guidelines. And what we're trying to do, obviously, is create a project that is compatible with your guidelines. Continuing up Chapala and then looking directly, this is a new view that I'll show you that was of particular concern at the last meeting, and then back down Chapala. So the second item, and I'll talk again more about compatibility, but the second item was market design. Now, we, as the architects, have essentially two fundamental design criteria. The first is to replace the market, and the second is to relocate the murals. This, of course, is Joe Knowles and the murals. And to do that, we don't have a lot of options. The beautiful thing that we discovered working with Pam and Tim is that there was a market on the corner of Chapala and Victoria that was designed by Edwards and Pluckett and built in 1938. It, of course, was demolished so that the existing building could be built. But given our criteria to need to relocate the market, we could locate a market in this spot, or we can locate a market in this spot. And that's pretty much what the site allows. And we have chosen to locate the market in the old historic location because we believe it's the right place, especially because it would help. We want to enliven Victoria. So this is the plan that you all reviewed the last time. And what I'm going to do is show you what we have changed. This is the new plan. So just scrolling back and forth, if you'll take a look at the loading dock area, the number one thing that we have changed is to push the building back a full 8 feet so that we can get more view of the Arlington. The other thing, if you'll look up here, you can see that we have pulled the buildings back away from the Arlington. And finally, if you'll look at the Victoria Street side, you can see that we have attempted to modulate that frontage. And I'll go through that stuff additionally. But here is that view topography that I was talking about before. And if you take a look at the second or the third story plan, you can see that we have positioned the 2 stories to be within that 2-story topography and the 3 within the 3, with the exception of this little section of building that is along Victoria, which is a 100-foot section. We have moved it since the last review further to the, I'll say, the west, so that it more aligns with this 3-story portion that we have here. So this is the one portion of the site, or the one portion of the project, that does not allow for that unencumbered view of the Arlington. And what's important to note is obviously we're creating an open space plaza in this location. So focusing in on the market, besides moving it back, as I have mentioned, we have looked at the design of this, and this is where I'd like Pam to comment. Pam and Tim discovered these photos for us and suggested that this was sort of the tradition of what open marketplace historically was. And I'll just run through these, Pam. This was on State Street.
1424. Looking at these historic photos, sorry, Pamela Post. Looking at the historic photos that we were able to find, many of these are in the Los Angeles area. We did find the 3 markets in Giordano's. And traditionally, in the 1920s and 30s in particular, markets had an open storefront, almost as we could say, like a living billboard. And the idea was that this be very accessible visibly, to the pedestrian and the passing motorist. And ideally, of course, the most optimum configuration was a rectangular configuration, and also that it ideally be placed on the corner, because that would give, again, the most visibility.
So this is what we are proposing. This is the redesign to get away from the glass and to design a market that is actually completely open. What's kind of neat about this is consistent with Marge's goals relative to making this project sustainable. We've actually studied the notion that this market would not be air conditioned, that it would be fully naturally ventilated, and that when it's operating, that it is completely open in this manner. The view along Chapala, we still have the murals there. We believe the murals are this is the right location for the murals. We think it's an elegant solution. not only in that they are being relocated on the site, but they're being relocated in the way that they were historically designed to be utilized. But we have greatly reduced the mass of this building and, again, pushed it back and eliminated some of the elements that were a concern the last time. This is a section so that you all can understand what we are planning with the market, with the clear story sort of monitor in the middle of it to allow in light and ventilation. And this is the green roof plan. Now, I won't have Bob get up here and explain this in detail, but we have worked on simplifying this and making this plan rational. We still have the bridge connection here, but we've pulled the usable portion back so that this green roof for the building that is at the corner would just be low planting to keep that building as low as possible. And that, by the way, we've discovered in looking at this, it's very important to keep that building down low because of the view corridors back up to the Arlington. There would be passive lawn space and trees and the ability for the residents to use this as open space. So let's look at some of the three-dimensional views of what this all means from the standpoint of the market. Starting with what we showed you before, I know there was a concern about the amount of glass and the look of this, and this is the way that the new design is proposing. So you can see that we have lowered the mass of it, we've opened it up, and it suddenly becomes much more engaged with that corner. And I think it's important to consider, again, what the existing condition is from that viewpoint, looking back at the Vaughns, and then the potential, and I think it's a very exciting potential of this market being, this open market being on the corner with the murals being on good public display above. Another view that really hasn't changed, obviously, with the building being along Chapala, that one-story building is going to obscure all but the top of the Arlington. But looking at the back, this was a big concern that you all had before. We didn't show this view, but this is basically the amount of encroachment. So you can see really there's very little of the rear of the Arlington that is encroached upon, and the portion that where there is encroachment is that low wall, which is basically shielding the trash and equipment at the rear of the market. And then looking at the view that we showed you the last time, this was the previous iteration, and you can see then the effect of moving that market back. I also want to mention that you can see in this, if you look up at the roofs on the buildings, you can see the effect in the model when we have that we have lowered these roofs all the way around. We've also introduced hips, which I'll show you, that have greatly enhanced the view. Third item was modulation along Victoria. So obviously when we choose to put the market on this corner, which we feel very strongly is the correct solution for the market, then obviously we have this remaining parcel to deal with. And looking at that again, you can see the change. If we look at what we were looking at before, I apologize for that. This was before and what we see now, so we have moved it back, and we've also moved the three-story portions back. I'm again struck by this image. I love this little building on Victoria, and when we think about the right thing to put on Victoria, and we think about the patterns that exist on all of the side streets along State Street, they are varying size properties. You might have a 25-foot wide piece of property, you might have a 55-foot wide piece of property, and they are 1- and 2-story buildings that obviously have been built as individual buildings. Frankly, I think the failure of the recent projects on Chapala is that they didn't respond to that natural pattern of development where there were natural lots that broke things up. So this is a sketch that I have done to show a little bit more detail. I want to say that obviously we're still in concept, and we're going to be coming back to you all for many times, even after Planning Commission, but this is the strong concept that we have for breaking that whole streetscape up from the market to these individual buildings so that they depict the kind of historic and traditional pattern that we know on State Street. If we look across the street on Victoria as far as what the massing is today, that's what you have in an exact sort of scale replica of this elevation that I showed you. So those are the buildings directly across the street from this elevation. And then understanding it in the bigger context, obviously utilizing the computer model, that is the scale of that streetscape with the 3 stories beyond, and then of course the Arlington that is considerably taller beyond all of that. I think the elevation is really important to understand the relative scale of this project to the Arlington. Again, that view that I think speaks to the lack of compatibility of the existing building. This is the view that we showed you previously, and this is the revised view with that open marketplace on the corner, and then the entrance to the residential. Going back also, this was a gable roof before. Again, we've introduced a number of hip roofs and lowered the building heights to really try to mitigate the effect of that 3-story massing. And I think it's clear in the model. You can see that it really helps. Looking at the entrance to this Paseo, this break in the Victoria Street elevation is a very, very important one. It's obviously the entrance to the market, but it creates that important kind of plaza, which is identified in numerous times in your guidelines as important features to incorporate into projects. And then the view that we showed you previously along Victoria, looking back, and the new view, so you can see how we have moved the 2-story portion of these buildings along Victoria further to the west in order to narrow that portion of the buildings that would block the view of the Arlington, that 100-foot section. And obviously we've put 3 stories behind that so that it is in that view blockage area. This view of the Arlington, has not changed dramatically. Again, we have lowered the buildings. As you can see, we've added landscaping along there. But I think you have to admit, when you consider what is there now, which is a loading zone and a 1960s wall, the potential of enlivening this Paseo and really making it a wonderful place is absolutely huge. And that brings me then finally to the proximity and relationship to the Arlington. That Paseo is one of them. We look at that blank wall now in that loading zone area. It brings to mind, the notion of cathedrals in villages all over the world, where the cities, the villages have nestled up into them. Pam and Tim have given us, these views, and I think they've concurred that, the scale of these buildings is such that you want to have an appropriately scaled building next to them, not to overpower them, but to create a sense of foreground. And of course, our own El Paseo is an example of that tradition. These are a couple of historic views of that. Pam, did you want to add anything there?
Well, I wanted to say something in regard to, I was going to show also, there was, if you think of the courthouse, and one of the comments that was made is in regard to, the landscaping around the courthouse. And the courthouse, of course, is a public building with the idea that it was always intended to have, a large area of landscape. In this case of the El Paseo was planned by James Osborne Craig to emulate, in a sense, the kind of Spanish villages that you would have seen in particularly Andalusian Spain. And they're defined really by their hardscape, with small pockets of landscape, large terracotta pots with flowers and trees, fountains and so on. But the hardscape is the important element in these buildings. And I think you can see with Craig's idea of the El Paseo that this has very analogous you say, design issues with what is being planned for this project. It's again, I think the idea of the Arlington is that there would be something that is not only compatible in design, but compatible in scale and massing.
So looking at that portion, as I mentioned before, we have pulled these buildings back in an effort to really develop a Paseo feeling along the Arlington. Obviously now you've got a parking lot and nothing else, and you have this wall that creates this barrier where there really is no Paseo at all. It's just an exit stair. And this is where I think the project has incredible opportunity. This is the previous view that I showed you of how we were going to develop that Paseo. And then this is the revised view, which is stepping the buildings back and increasing that walkable surface. We want to be able to have enough planting to be able to plant some mature trees, and certainly we're open to your suggestions on what to do there. But the profound difference between what you have now with what is essentially a 6-story mass of a building and an asphalt parking lot next to it, and the potential of actually engaging that and making it a Paseo is a wonderful opportunity. The plan that Bob has prepared for this, I apologize, we kind of have to turn you around here a little bit. This, of course, is the Arlington, but what we're proposing is that we would repave that entire area to gain that extra width. The closest these buildings come to the Arlington is about 19 feet. So we have anywhere from about 28 feet to 19 feet between these masses, which is very consistent with what you would typically find in Andalusian villages. We have areas where we can plant trees because that's the Mother Earth where we've held the parking structure back. But we also want to make sure, as Pam has mentioned, that we have good amounts of pavement and patterns, which is typical to these villages. Looking in the other direction, this is what we showed you previously, and then this is the revised plan, so you can see the increased width of this Paseo and the further refinement of that. This is a view that you did not see before, but I think it helps to understand, again, the potential of what that area, what that space could be next to the Arlington. So closing, this is the elevation. If you looked at it projected against the Arlington, so this would be the elevation that would face back towards the Arlington. And then, of course, the elevation of the Paseo leading up to the Arlington. And the same shot along Victoria I showed you before, and then the elevation along Chapala. And what these elevations show, I believe, is that this project is very compatible with this historic landmark, and we have gone out of our way to make sure that the massing is appropriate relative to allowing for view corridors. So, in closing, we've reviewed your compatibility guidelines, which are up on the wall. I have been practicing architecture in this town for 30 years. I think you know me well enough to know now that I care very much about the architecture that we do. 4 of our buildings are in your new guidelines. This project has got a long way to go with this commission relative to review and detail, but the important thing that I'm trying to communicate to you today is that the concept for this project meets your guidelines. And I know Marge has her heart and soul in this project. We obviously have a long way to go, having to go to Planning Commission, and I would respectfully request, for not only us but for Marge, that if you do not believe that there is something about this project that does not meet the guidelines that you have up on the wall, I really ask that you be very specific so that we understand how any aspect of this is not compatible with the guidelines so that we can address that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your patience.
You almost always hit the 30-minute mark. It's amazing. If there are no more... I am going to open to public comment.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. This is very interesting. I have some problems. I have a number of problems, but it's certainly, first place, I am concerned about the market and its design. I don't find markets addressed in this publication. And I think going back to the open air markets of the period, and that's what was there on West Victoria Street. I don't know, I guess I want to ask the Pamela, the Post Hazeltine, could they find any footprint of that market on the on any Sanborn map? It doesn't. It seems that it ought to have picked up on a Sanborn map.
Well, I'm going to hurry, Mr.
Yeah, let me. I think she would like me to go through. So, I would like to see a food market design, not from the ones that were thrown up in the utilitarian ones that were thrown up in the 20s and 30s that had very little architectural design, and many of them came out of plans developed by the market chains in God knows where. I also want to question the grass roof and how that fits into the guidelines. That certainly isn't addressed in the guidelines. I don't think it fits the APV, and I still I think the retention of the mural is sort of the tail that's wagging the dog, and I don't think that is necessary. I don't know how big that market has to be, but I would love to have the whole rear facade of the Arlington, which is so handsome, visible and not hidden by structures. That was one of the comments I know that was done for the other project on the corner of Sola that was so, which was caused consternation among you members. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam, would you like to
Yes, in regard to the footprint of the Edwards and Plunkett, we do have. Here. Yeah. We do have a drawing that was submitted. It was not a drawing, but a schematic that was submitted at the time that the Vaughn's Market was being built, and it shows the location and the footprint of the old market, which is right on the corner, exactly where this market is, the proposed market is.
Thank you. I'm going to move from public comment to questions from the commission. Are there any questions? Yes. Anyone?
Yeah, I do have a question. I don't know if you know this offhand, but the building massing was set back from Victoria. Did those distances increase from the sidewalk? And it looks like it, but what are the dimensions of what you're proposing?
What we are proposing is the sidewalk would meet the pedestrian guideline standards of 10.5 feet, plus the minimum 2.5 foot of what they call the furniture or furnishing zone, which is also for landscaping. That's again in the guidelines. So we have that as a minimum, and then we exceed that in some cases by 2 feet. So we have basically between 2.5 and 4.5 feet beyond the 10.5-foot sidewalk, and it is currently, right now, it's just a little under, it's right at a little less than 8 feet, the sidewalk that is there today. So we would be building additional sidewalk width on our property. And that would, okay. So the place that shows is right here. Yeah, that's the second. So basically, so our property line, I'm sorry that this isn't showing it, but the property line is out here. So we have a minimum of the 10.5 feet and 2.5 feet prescribed in the pedestrian guidelines, master plan. And then we have additional amounts. So here we have over 4.5 feet.
In this, from here,
Yes.
at scale.
Yeah. Oh. It actually looks like it's closer to 6 feet.
Let's do that.
It's 16th inch. And again, the sidewalk is at the 10.5 feet. And we have that same sidewalk width at Chapala.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have a question. What is the percentage of open space that you have approximately?
I don't know if we have a current calculation, but we have landscaped and paving areas exceed 34, it looks like 35%, 29.7% in paved areas, which is all the paseos and courts and plazas, and then we have 5.6 in landscaping. Now, the important thing is that does not include the green roof. So the green roof is in addition. It is landscape space that is not in that landscape number.
So that would be an additional probably
18,000
square feet of landscaping.
Does that
Hardscape.
include the widening of the paseo in the back, or those numbers?
It does not. It includes everything on our property.
On our
It doesn't include the property on the Arlington.
Because now this is almost the same, or the same size as that paseo. Yeah.
And is the roof garden only for the residents, right? It's not a public.
N-
the roof
It
garden
is for the residents.
only. Okay, so that bridge we see is the bridge near the entrance. So that's the bridge from the units to the garden?
That's correct. This is the circulation for the units. This is the lobby area below. The main vertical circulation is this elevator right here, and this pathway extends to that green roof, and then there's circulation around. I'm on.
Is that the only way to the green roof, or is there another?
Well, there's a stairway from the ground right here. There's a stairway from the ground here, and then there's that bridge element over here.
Got it.
Any other questions? I just want to confirm what I thought I saw in your presentation. Hold on a minute. That you have a 10-foot zone going like this, correct? A 1-story zone, a 2-story zone, and then a 3-story zone?
Let me clarify, because I tried to.
Yeah.
The only area where I do not conform to that is this 100-foot wide section where we have 2 stories.
and this
And what
guy.
we did then is we put 3 stories behind it, because obviously the 3-story here does not affect the view. That view topography we figured were about 45-foot or so zones, so you need to go back about 45 feet before the 2-story can start, and then another 45 or so feet to the 3-story. And so that's what we have here: 1, 2, and then 3. So this is the 3-story portion, with the exception of that portion here, which sits behind the 2-story. And one of the reasons we moved this way was because this is approximately where that mechanical screen is now for the Vaughn. So it was more in keeping, and obviously kept this view along here as wide as possible.
Well, you anticipated my subsequent question, which is why did you then break your zoning with these two pieces?
I think really because it seemed to us that having Victoria remain all just one-story buildings was just not in keeping with the fabric of the community. It in our minds it needs some two-story, and so that became the place where we felt it would have the least impact, maintaining as wide a corridor associated with this paseo to the east, and as wide a corridor associated with our plaza and the Chapala Victoria corner view at the west.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah. What is this circle thing?
That would just be a pavement texture. If you there was a little star pattern that was in the Arlington back in the days of this 38 grocery store, and so just some kind of a pavement pattern.
Paving pattern.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these red ones are the 2 stories and the white ones are the 3 stories?
That's
Is that
correct.
Yeah. And a subsequent question, I'm sorry, did you try an elevation with 1 stories? Do you have a flimsy or anything?
No, we didn't. It just seemed like this all being 1 story wanted to have some 2-story breakup.
Okay. Any other questions?
Do you have elevations or
Yes, we have-
sketches?
Well, I have the sketches on the screen that I can go back to, but we do have the elevations and we have the 3D views that we showed you. Unfortunately, you have 2 sets that are black and white. And obviously the reason I showed you that, that little hand sketch, I think, is to try to depict. Sometimes this is a hard thing to look at, but obviously. At the end of the day, the detail will have to be there.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. This structure here, up on the roof or whatever, these are the. I mean, it's conceptual, but these are like the windows. This is stucco, and that's that thing in the.
Well, what you're looking at here is actually back from the face of that building over 70 feet.
70 feet.
So that is that club room that we've put on, and that is a 2-story portion that would be in that 2-story
Okay.
view topography.
So this is roughly the fenestration of that.
Well, it is at this point. I mean,
At this point.
we're going to
Okay.
want to have nice windows, obviously, looking out on the green roof
Okay.
from that.
Yeah,
And
just a
that little
question.
club room is integral to that green roof because it's part of the recreation features, for the residents.
Any further questions? Any questions from any other commissioners? Seeing none, let's move to comments. Yes, Mr. Kopas.
Spark a topic to start with because nobody's speaking yet. Along Victoria Street where the buildings modulate, how many of those have we seen that have really been successful where it ends up not looking like a suburban shopping center when all the rest of the buildings are actually to the sidewalk? So I'd just like your discussion and feelings on that one way or the other.
Thank you. Commissioners understand that we'd like a little bit of comment on that if they wish. Someone like to start on the comments? I'll just call on someone if they don't. Yes, Mr. Peugeot.
Like this project more than others last time, and I think it would be appropriate for those that had more problems to start.
Okay.
It just seems to me that
I
the
see your
logical way
Okay.
to
Then
go
I'll
around.
start down there.
First of all, we want to thank you for listening to us as you did, in my opinion, and trying to move this project along. I have some likes and some ideas for changing that might make it a better project. I personally was very concerned about the south end of the store, the glass areas and so forth, and I think your solution is a very good one. The only problem I see, this is very minor, but the markets that we have been shown have tremendous foot traffic in front of them, and people are drawn in. I don't think there's that much foot traffic on Chapala and or Victoria against Chapala, but maybe this will create that. I think adding more hipped roofs was a very good idea, and possibly you could add more hip roofs yet that would help. I mean, this is a perfect example of how a minor change can make a major difference, in my opinion. My suggestions would be to every foot or couple of feet that you cut back the 45-degree corner at the market opens up from the intersection and from Victoria Street a major swath of view corridor up to the Arlington. And
So that wall.
if you lose a few square feet of rentable area by moving that wall back, I noticed this 2 weeks ago, you open up a major view corridor with very little sacrifice to the project and to the net income of that market. I would appreciate it if you could step back the third floor and maybe the second floor and third floor of the 3-story units on the Paseo on the east end of the project nearest the theater. You had one slide that showed
Probably this, I've got it here.
a 3-story mass that came up.
Both of these.
Well, it was more, it was the other side, but this is a very harsh
This one?
3-story. Yes, right here.
That the existing Paseo.
Take the trees out and you have a pretty massive 3-story elevation unbroken. And I think to take that second and third, bring it back a little bit and not have that 40-foot wall or whatever the height of that is would really help the view corridor looking to the main tower and the Arlington itself. I question needing 9'6" plate heights. I think 9 would be adequate for units that are as small as these are. And I would
just want to clarify, by the way, that the 9.5 was the ceiling height, but that's at the first and second floor. At the third floor, we would have lower plates. In other words,
well,
we
you could
drop.
have volume ceiling
Yeah,
there,
exactly. So we dropped the plates to 8 and 9 feet just to create the variation in the roofs, but we did drop that roof down to.
To me, the saleability of a 9-foot versus a 9'6" ceiling height to someone is the same, but the community gets an additional foot or so, which is, I think, really important here. And I'm a little concerned about the third floor in the second floor zone being, as you mentioned, 100 feet, I believe, being 100 feet wide. If there's any way to compress that or break it up, and I know you're still designing it, so we're a ways away from that, but I think that much
So right here.
that much building being 3-story essentially in the second story topography.
But it is blocked by that.
No, I know that,
Okay.
but still, it isn't here, and it's not particularly here. Just reducing that width down would not sacrifice much to the project, but would help the community's view of the building. Other than that, those are my only comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Yes?
Well, number one, I would like to say that I have never doubted the fact that this was more compatible in the architectural style than one that we will not mention. I think Brian has done a very good job that way. I agree with Don's comments. I'm still having problems with I love the idea of the open market. There's a little one in Carmel that I just love. And but the basic design around the marketplace is still pretty stark to me. I don't know if you've got plants on top of those columns or exactly what, but I'm kind of concerned about all of this stuff that's beginning to happen. That's going to block views and the size of these trees and so forth. I think you know me, I love to have a lot of shade and a lot of garden, but I'm also concerned about having too much grow up and further restrict the view of the Arlington. And I certainly agree with the comments that Don made about the back third-story units. It's very, they really loom up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, would you like to complete this side?
Complete the side. Okay. I see a lot of progress here. I like the market much better. It reminds me of things in Carmel, actually things in San Francisco, and I like this idea of an open market. How to practically make that work is another idea, but I like the style of the awnings. I still find how the murals are set up to be machine-like and harsh. There's got to be a way to soften those columns in between the panels. I don't know if it's a vine on those columns. That mural needs softening. It looks like a too industrial to me. That could use something. Maybe it's greenery on those columns. I'm not sure, but there's something that's really harsh about looking at that mural. So it's a wonderful mural. I like the mural, but the big wide columns are problematic. I agree with Commissioner Sharp's comments about the second and third stories. I was thinking about this flat roof garden here. It looks like that's still part of the project.
Well, all that is just intended to not be a roof garden, but just a green roof. So in other words, right? So it's just planted. So we don't want it to be high enough to have a rail. So it's a non-accessible roof.
But still, there's something that needs to happen there. I don't know if it's cascading plants off the top or some other than just a flat roof. Again, I'm gonna harp on that. Maybe it's a little bit of just a slight roof around that. So I don't know. It just seems kind of modern. I think the I don't know. I feel like the angles of the walkways and things are starting to work for me better. I'm feeling better and better about this project. But again, all you can do more, and I think you need to do a little bit more pushing buildings back a little bit, as per Commissioner Sharp's comments, are for the good. And I just feel much better about this market on the corner. I really like what you've done. It feels like starting to feel like a real place. I really appreciate that work, and I appreciate the work looking at some of the historic markets. Those open air markets, if they can work, are just great. You see the fruit and see the openings and so on. I was hoping for something like that, and I'm definitely seeing that. I like the increased landscaping over on this area, but again, I think you can finesse some of the second and third story massings.
Thank you. Ms. Murray?
Appreciation of your work. definitely the market part on the corner is improved. It's just that it really, to me, while it's really improving, it just doesn't feel compatible with the larger part, which is driven by the art. And I know we want the art to be there, and I guess you probably researched all of it, and that's probably the only place they could go. I don't know. I don't know whether they could go in the back of the building and through the paseo or something, maybe not. I still really think that the back of the Arlington, that part, to me is also very visually important. And if there's a way to have that part be somewhat speaking or incompatible with the market design, because right now it's just kind of a wall back there, and it's just very utilitarian.
I'm sorry. Which wall were you?
It's the
Okay.
the wall. I mean, you've exposed the back entrance of the Arlington. I just don't know whether it could be pulled back more to do something there. And that view to me is very important.
And what this doesn't show is obviously vines on that trellis, which I think would be a very important aspect.
Okay, well, maybe that's a solution. One of the markets that I don't know if you took a look at which is also really good example, is that, and I think it's on Figueroa and Chapala, the Riley Market.
Yeah.
There's Riley. That corner is one of the best corners in town, because even though there's parking in front and asphalt, which I wish you would, but there is that sense of openness and that the rhythm of those buildings. In fact, your design kind of reminded me of that. And so I guess my biggest problem is that disconnect between this larger structure and that corner, and I really have no suggestions to say to you other than keep thinking, I guess, and find a way to integrate those two. The other issue I have is this bridge. I just don't know. It just looks to me like it's one of these very big, heavy, kind of bulky entrance way into the paseo that really, to me, will not really be compatible with the market, the feeling of pedestrian openness market. I don't know, maybe there's another solution with that, but to me that's another obstruction to the view of the Arlington, that sense of openness in the sky. So I'm not saying don't take it out, I'm just saying rethink about that and its place. I will continue to be a minority in the commission in really thinking about the density of the 3-story buildings. I just would wish some of them could be 2 stories or reduced in size or something. I still very strongly think that the density is just not giving you that sense of spatial relationship to the Arlington. You will see Arlington, yes. I mean, Pam and Kim has shown, and I think very convincingly, that you'll have these open view sheds. But I'm talking about a feeling of physical space, and I think Don Sharp was giving you some of suggestions on how to tone that down on the east side on the Paseo. But I just think that no matter what, if some of those 3-story buildings, if none of those are reduced or none of them are changed, it is going to be a big impact on this site, no matter what. And so I will leave it at that. It's still ongoing, but I still believe the density I'm not comfortable with at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peugeot?
You're done first. No?
Well, we all know how this process goes. It goes through the
Planning Commission, they go through a lot of things that go to the Planning Commission and finally comes back for final architectural resolutions. I personally think that this project is ready, and I know that when it comes back, it's not going to come back the same as it went in. It will be a whole bunch of other things that inevitably happen. I agree with most of the comments made. I think the architecture has a ways to go in some aspects, but at this point, I'd like to talk about the mass bulk and scale, the general site design, the parking, the locations, the whole overall plan, and I completely support it. I like the way the project is going. I know it's going to go farther in a positive way, and I think it's time to let this thing go through. That's the way I see it. I agree with most of the comments made. Just the purview that I think that needs to be addressed when you come back, maybe. I think I agree with the comment on the stairway to the market top. It's a complex thing how to link all these buildings together and get into the market. It's difficult. I'm not sure you're there yet. I also agree.
You mean the bridge, Alex?
The bridge and the other ways, all of the bridges. You know, I mean, I don't quite see them exactly how you work them out, and I think and the bridge itself too. Also, I think, I mean, it's not something that you need to address now because, you know, I think at some other future time. Also, the concept of the green roof, still I don't quite, I have a hard time visualizing it, or how it will feel for people if they see, how will it feel for somebody walking to see a tree growing out of the roof? It's a little bit unsettling to me in terms of, it doesn't seem right to see a tree coming out of the roof, but you know, it's not here or there. Maybe there's some other thing. The third one is I think Robert has a point about the murals facing Chapala, the way they are shown, because you were trying to show them exactly the way they are facing Victoria now, and you were very, very good at that, and you put them exactly. Maybe the next time you come back, you may want to get a little bit more creative, to have maybe the same spacing, but the sandstone wall, the pilasters and all that. I don't think it has to be that loyal to its original setup. So those are my comments. I think this is ready to go to the next step. You know,
Thank you.
May I just add one more comment? This is just one more comment about the mural. I also was thinking that could the mural be freestanding away from the building? That way you won't be restricted with all those columns. I don't know how that would work, but
I know you don't like me to comment, but just to help you with the mural, it seems to me that the nature of the mural is such that it needs a good amount of foreground to view. So it doesn't work, for instance, in the paseos, because you don't have enough space to stand back far enough to even understand them. You know, and that's our conclusion, and that's Pam and Tim's conclusion as well.
I want to comment in regard to the murals. When we wrote our first report, which was a report for Vaughn's Market or Safeway, when they were making some changes to the facade, the one component that we found, met the guidelines as far as significant were the murals. And we mentioned at the time that the changes would be fine, and then actually the building itself had no significance, but the murals did, and so they should remain in situ. That was what for that particular project. In this case, we feel that the murals should remain on site, and with the whole idea of the murals was that they would be public art in the sense of accessible to public view, and that's their was original intent. That's what we feel from the perspective of historic preservation, that they should remain as part of a public view on a public street, and they shouldn't be broken up, that they should be seen in contiguity, all 6 of the panels.
Thank you.
I'm going to, if it will help the commission and the applicant. I'm going to try those straw votes again. Would the commission like to have that? And I assume the applicants would too. Okay. For my own comments, I may tease you, Brian, about the length of your presentation, but your presentation had content and it reflected the amount of work that you had done.
Thank you.
So I much appreciate that. You had a lot to explain and you had a lot to present. I think all the changes that you made were very good. And I would imagine you're probably happier with what you've got as well. I hope so. I continue to be a little uncertain and puzzled about your view of urban design, and I think what's interesting here is that we have mixed use that is not vertical in nature, but it's horizontally sprawled. And this is not something we normally have. And that is, in my mind, not quite worked out. Secondarily, I also continue to be disturbed by the connection that you are forced to make between the residences and the top of the marketplace. Again, I think that's a function of the horizontal versus the vertical mixed-use concept here. I also agree with Mr. Sharp. I understand your point of view regarding your sight line here, but his point was quite valid. Here and here, this third story impacts the view of the landmark, which I still consider to be a tremendously sensitive point here. I'm going to ask then to go back, and I'm basically going to the compatibility analysis as you wished. The first...
Suzette, could I ask you a question before you do that about your comment about the horizontal nature of this? Obviously, I'm getting comments that to reduce the third story and push things in. So we would love to go more vertical. We can't. What we're trying to do is to emulate a housing solution which goes back hundreds of years in little villages where you have pathways between units, and that's always been the effort. So is it the circulation between the units? You said you're puzzled about the urban design. I'm puzzled about the comment. I just don't understand what you're...
If I knew, I would suggest. I'm just, as I said, I am uncertain about what it is, and that I don't feel that it is, and this may be a personal preference, like Jake, I'm not convinced that modulation here is the right idea. It's not an urban, for me, relationship to these guys. But others are asking for setbacks and more landscape. So I understand where you are. So these are all personal preferences. And my perception of being in, a city is, and I'm considering this a much more urban solution to your project. And so I'm looking for a more urban solution. And again, I think I'm in the minority there. I, probably would go straight here. I wouldn't do this here. So these are, I know I'm in the minority, so I'm reluctant to express these personal, more urban solutions to what I consider to be an urban problem.
No, but I think it's good that you do, because Chair Naylor, I think that it's important that you do, because this has been, we are urban developers. I've lived in Santa Barbara since 1976, and I understand exactly what you're saying. And so when we have the modulation with the roofs, and we have the different roof types, I like that, because you're drawing your eye to the Arlington. Now you don't draw your eye to the Arlington, but with this modulation, it gives you interest. Something that we worked very hard with Pam and Tim on in this is the view of the Arlington that, we're talking about blocking. We have lowered those buildings, and I hope not to the point where we're doing this, so that you get that so-called second-story band on the Arlington, really pretty unobstructed. But I appreciate your comments, because this is as urban a site as you get in Santa Barbara. Not Chapala and Gutierrez, but this is right off state, a very, very urban location. And I appreciate your comments.
Well, thank you.
Suzette, I just want to say this. I absolutely believe that being next to the Arlington, we think about these buildings that everybody's concerned about, large buildings, and this is a large site, and I'm convinced in my heart of hearts that the answer is to break it into more than one building. I think the problem with Chapala 1 is that whether you like it or not, it's all one building, and the romance of the Arlington Theater, when you go inside, is that whole Andalusian village thing, and I think the opportunity, like El Paseo is, like the adobes of the town are, where all of a sudden the street grid is broken. We're respecting the street grid with the urban buildings on the street frontage, but then a surprise happens behind, and I think at the end of the day that is the only way that you break the mass down so you don't feel like you have a big urban building next to the Arlington.
Thank you. I am going to go to the straw votes, please. And the first one would be how many commissioners find the proposed mass, bulk, and scale compatible? All those who do? Well, it's a mass, bulk, and scale.
I understood that some people were supporting this with some comments, and with some comments to move this and that. So
Okay.
with those comments, right, it would be.
Right,
not as
so the
proposed,
question
but
in
with the
terms
comments
of
made. Right?
Yes, with the comments made, and I will do a quick summary, which is, I can't remember exactly, but that this 3-story mass be diminished in some way. Correct?
And that we peel back at these
That
two
we
Paseo sides.
Step back on the east and the west.
On the corner of the market.
And the market be
45-degree.
opened up in terms of the angle, or some other way of opening up the view here.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
but you are saying you need to take a straw vote, and that's the answer for these drawings. If you want to see revisions that you are right now outlining, then you will need to take another set of straw votes. You can't take a set of straw votes predicting what the drawings are going to look like. You need to vote on what's in front of you now, not what you would like to see, and then, if this is pulled back, then yeah, I support it. You can't vote on something that's not on the drawings right now.
I think, though, Susan, that where Alex was coming from is that we have the problem here, and this is the trap, is to really satisfy the commission, I've got to completely finish this design, and to do that before I go to planning commission isn't realistic. So that's the dilemma.
If the chair and the commission is voting on compatibility analysis questions, they need to reflect what they're looking at in the drawings today, not what it could be revised to. Does the commission understand where I'm coming
Yes,
from?
we understand what you're saying.
It's
I
pretty
have
clear.
a question, though, just as a point of understanding.
You go, Mike.
At the last meeting, our historic structures report was approved by this commission, which I just want to understand that report stated that we were compatible with this historic landmark, this concept, and so when you ask for this vote and nobody raises their hand, I'm confused because you voted to approve the historic structures report.
I will try and explain that. Mr. Jokopov will probably explain much better.
Okay.
That was a CEQA matter.
Okay.
That was compatible in terms of CEQA findings. We are now finding compatibility in terms of our guidelines. It's two very different things.
Okay. Got it.
You did perfectly.
Thank you. I've been training for this.
Good. You knew it would come.
As Brian previously requested, when we do the straw vote and you don't agree with the compatibility, can you state specifically the reasons why?
Yeah. All right, we'll ask again regarding the mass Vulcan scale. All those who can support the mass Vulcan scale in terms of compatibility, please raise your hands. Very well, that's one person. And now you would like each one who does not to say so. And if in fact it is, you wish to have this diminished, you wish to have this open, and you wish to have these step back, just say, yes, I agree with that.
But Brian, has the opportunity to find other ways to modify.
Yes. Okay, then why don't we go each one?
So just as another point of clarification, so you're going to tell us how it doesn't comply with the EPV guidelines or how it doesn't comply with your personal taste?
With your interpretation, your personal, experienced interpretation of the guidelines, which I think is why there are so many of us here.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Louise, would you like to be first? This is going to be slogging.
Well, I feel that some of the three-story units are still too big. Oh, sorry, guys. I didn't mean it.
The unit sizes, you mean?
The height. I don't. Whatever you do inside them is your thing. I agree that front unit behind the Victoria Street building should come down to 2 stories. Yeah, and that there should be setback on the units on the back and the side.
No one said this should come down to the whole thing should come down to 2 stories, I don't think.
Well, it should come down to some extent, and I'd like to see it too.
I imagine, Brian, if you asked everyone if it should come down to 2 stories, you might not like the answer.
Well, what I don't understand about that is after what I showed you is you don't see that portion with the 2 stories on the street. Well, yeah, but I mean, could you show me where it is right there? I mean, it's.
Well, there's a tree in the way for one thing.
Well, there will be a tree there. I mean, that's a very good point, Louise.
So at this point, let's not argue so that we can just get through and you can get your information about this. You're done? Okay. Mr. Sharp?
I have nothing to add to what I said before.
Right. Mr. Adams?
Yeah, I think it's close. I think some of the tweaking and pushing in of the width and working with the height. I agree with Commissioner Sharp's comments. I have nothing more to add. I think it's almost there, but I can't honestly say, it's fully compatible yet. But it's getting there. And I also feel there's issues with the bridge. I think I heard that comment, but I think it's almost there.
It's the issue with the bridge.
Is the bridge a compatibility issue?
Because it's a bridge or the design of the bridge?
It's a compatibility issue because it's doing some blocking. It's a big structure. To me,
Can I go to that view for you real quick?
Sure.
In drawing form,
Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's this view.
What page is that?
The Arlington is here. It's A13.
Can you explain to me how the bridge affects the view of the Arlington?
Maybe it's the bulk of it or something.
Well,
I don't
I
know.
think you also have
Anyway,
to
I
recognize
disregard
that
that
it's your
comment.
selected view,
I
and you
just-
may be seeing
I-
it from a different point of view.
You can't see
Okay,
the bridge.
disregard
until
the
you
bridge
pass market.
comment. I strike that. But let's just say that I think the buildings need a little bit more work in terms of opening up on the east and west sides, and I'll just leave it at that.
Ms. Murray?
I think the architects know the gist of my concerns. I see this. You talked about the small village in Andalusian, and then there was a slide of the El Paseo. This does not give me the sense of El Paseo. That's the difference between you and me.
This is the same width as the El Paseo from the Paseo from De La Guerra to the restaurant. This width.
Yeah, but if you go down there and look at those buildings on there, they're not going to be 3 stories staring at you on that courtyard over there. That's what I'm just trying to say, that you have your sense of what the village is. It's not mine. When I look at a compatibility and the guidelines, that's not what I see in this project. And I'm not saying they all have to disappear or anything. I'm just saying they're big. You're going to look at it and you're going to keep working on it. It's not so much. I agree. The views, they have argued the views are going to be there. We're going to see that second part of the Arlington. I'm talking about the physical density of this project and not feeling that right now it's not going to feel like El Paseo if this is built right now, is what I'm saying. So it's a difference of opinion, and that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you should come to my opinion. We are expressing our reasoning behind why why I'm voting to say size, bulk, and scale is not still okay with me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I just would like to address Ms. Murray's comment in regard to the El Paseo. One of the reasons that the El Paseo scale is as it is because it is in conjunction with making it compatible with the Casa de la Guerra, which is a single-story structure. So the scale, bulk, and massing is appropriate to that. The Arlington Theater, of course, is something that is quite monumental and massive. So the scale, bulk, and massing of these buildings is appropriate to that structure.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your opinion, but my opinion is that I don't believe at this point that the 3 stories given here, the majority of these buildings will give you that sense of compatibility as far as size, bulk, and scale and density. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just concerned about it, and majority of the commission will have no problem with it. Just expressing our personal, our individual opinions.
Next straw vote is, how many commissioners find the project compatible with the adjacent landmark? All those who do? 1.
I do.
Mr. Adams and Mr. Peugeot.
In architectural style?
Compatibility.
It's actually, Madam Chair, it's whether the project's been designed to be sensitive to the
Yes.
adjacent landmark.
I agree with you. I'm sorry about
I would
that.
agree. I would agree with that.
Designed to be sensitive to the adjacent
The
landmark.
design, yeah, definitely.
Could everybody raise their hands?
In
Yes,
terms of
design and
Thank you.
So I would just like to ask you, are you disagreeing because you think it should be more urban in its design? I mean, I think, for my own, I would like to know if your chair, if you're disagreeing because, I mean, most people here don't think it's too dense and it's too much next to the Arlington. I wonder, are you thinking that it isn't, that it needs to be more massive in some respect as it sits next to the Arlington? Because a discussion that we have had with our historians at great length is that, you know, a two-story building next to the Arlington isn't appropriate because of the size and bulk of the building.
see, that's just exactly the point that I disagree with. Because the reason why Arlington...
No, I understand. I was just asking her opinion.
That's a really good analogy of the difference between you and me.
Yeah.
Because I look at the Arlington and I look at State Street and the 2 and 1 story, that to me is really the Arlington.
No, I appreciate that,
So
and I hear you.
I just want to clarify that's the point of difference. It's not that I dislike your 3 stories. I love them. You're a great architect. It's just that
Thank you.
I'm looking at that spatial and feeling of the density that's going to be there. Thanks. Sorry.
what am I looking for? I wish I could explain better. For me, it is still an unresolved amalgamation of residential and commercial in terms of urban massing and how they relate to each other. I don't find this bridge to be necessarily the right solution. I don't know what the solution is, and I don't know if, I think Brian's decisions about making the market here are intelligent. This has got to be here. Maybe it's this. I don't really know. I just know it doesn't integrate for me as an urban solution. And so, in terms of my vote, in essence, the max bulk and scale is compatible with me. I don't have a problem with it. But on the other side of it, for me, the view from here, the view from across the street, and the view from here, I'm disturbed by this piece right here. I understand what you're saying about this blocking and this blocking, but I think you can do something here. So that's yes, I think you're very sensitive to this landmark in terms of what you're trying to do in viewing this, but I am still disturbed by this.
So you would choose to have that completely open, that be
No,
monolithically one
absolutely
story
not.
along?
No, absolutely not. I'm just
Okay.
saying I have walked by the street several nights and days in a row, very disturbed and very unhappy and very unclear, and standing and looking and saying night and day. And it's a very difficult thing. I mean, I admire you for taking this on. It's a tough thing to do.
Well, it's a very important thing to do.
I agree.
It's the redevelopment site in our
absolutely agree.
community.
Yes,
I
Number
agree.
one.
And that's why I think it's so important that we voice our deepest opinions about this. We are all trying to give the best for our city, and you are, and I'm very admiring of all that.
And I would just like to say that I think
Your mic's not on.
I would just like to say that the comments that this commission has made since the very first meeting have helped to make this a better project, without a doubt. And, we understand how sensitive this site is. And I'm not expecting you to understand this, but we are also balancing economics with developing this site. And to be completely honest with you, if we didn't have 20,900 square feet of commercial and the ability to add another 3,000 square feet under Measure E, this would remain a bonds for a very long time, because the commercial is the only thing that makes this site economically feasible with what we have to do here. So I'm just sharing with you as well. We feel very strongly about this location and about this landmark.
I'm going on to the next straw vote. How many commissioners find the proposed location of the mural appropriate? Okay. Yippee. How many commissioners find there's an appropriate amount of open space?
How many?
3. Do you wish to hear why?
Yeah?
Go.
Well, it's this whole thing about it being so crowded.
Okay.
The space between the Arlington and those buildings and so forth. To me, it just the closeness of the buildings to each other. The fact that the buildings in the back are so close together and so forth. I think
So,
it's
Louise,
got a
is
lot
there a
of
distance that you could help us with there?
40 feet.
40
No,
feet.
I'm just joking, Brian.
Okay.
It's difficult for me, not being an architect, to tell you exactly why, but I would like to see more open space on the project.
Sharp?
Well, the problem with straw votes is
Yes.
the percentage of disagreement
Right.
that you have with the question. And
Right.
I think it needs a little more, but what is a little more? Is it another 300 square feet or 3,000? I can't answer that. It depends on,
Right.
it hinges on
Yeah.
so many other things.
Right. I agree. I find
But
straw votes to be.
I can't say, yes, the open space is perfect and shouldn't be increased, because I think it can and should be.
Okay. Mr. Adams?
I think the open space is good. I like how I like the treatment of the back. I like how this space was improved. I mean, you know, it is an urban project, and I find it very. I want to feel like this is like an urban village. I feel like the open space and pockets and things, conceptually anyway, and from what I can see, it's pretty good.
Okay.
I'm just going to abstain from voting on that. Because,
Okay.
The open space to me is so contingent on so many other.
Madam Chair, maybe I could help, because I agree with Dawn about the straw votes, and so could I just articulate a few questions that I think will help us to try to break this log jam.
Whatever you need to know.
I think it starts with the notion that I presented at the very beginning, which obviously is still a strong component of this project, which is the feeling that the frontages are reflected by different buildings, that I don't want this to feel like one building, that we have a market on the corner, and that we have that pattern of street frontages that we're used to on all of our side streets of 30-foot, 50-foot, whatever lots, and that we build out the street in that fashion. Does everybody agree with that approach that we have taken? I mean, are we good there? No, I don't know. Maybe it is a straw vote.
I actually would like a vote that, we're kind of tiptoeing around this, and I don't, we've created a relationship, the commission and myself and our team, and I would like a vote because I now would like to be able to take this project to the next level. Go to the Planning Commission. We're going to come back to you a lot over the next, 8 months or a year or whatever it is. And so, I would like your blessing to get us to that next level. You see what we have done to date. You know how important this is for us. I mean, the comments that I have made to our historians, we have included them in every design meeting that we've had. We want this building, when it is built, not to look like anything you've seen built in the last 10, 20 years. We want it to look like it's been here for 100 years. We want this to be so contextual to that location and that historic landmark. So, I would like very much for you to, I'd like to see an up and down vote to get us to the next level.
I would suggest, can we get a vote on whether this project's ready for Planning Commission? Can we do that?
Well, we have to, mass bulk and scale is a conceptual approval. And so without that, you wouldn't be able to go to Planning Commission unless you chose to, of course. That's your decision. Am I interpreting that correctly?
That's exactly how I interpreted it. Although I heard Alex's prodding that he felt it was ready to go to the Planning Commission, which I appreciated, I didn't hear anybody feeling like they could
because we were stuck
let
on
it
the
go.
mass bulk and scale thing.
Right.
So that's why I just want to be sure your question or statement was.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm asking if.
I think you've made that
like
vote. It's my opinion. I think the majority of you have said it's not ready to go to the Planning Commission.
Well, we're, I think, 3 for 4 on the straw vote, so.
We're missing one commissioner.
Missing one commissioner, and, I don't know the logistics of that, if that all has to completely comply. You said we're close, so to me,
Madam Chair, can I explain what the criteria was intended? It was primarily a communication tool to the Planning Commission. So it's not that whether its project's ready or not, it's whether or not this commission will be able to approve the project once it returns. And so the goal here is to have clear direction as to what's necessary in order for this commission to approve this project at preliminary approval. So if you can do that with clear direction as to what changes are necessary, sure, this commission could put that on record, tell the Planning Commission that they expect these changes, and the Planning Commission would hopefully follow suit and that would be the approval. But what we don't want is there to be a conflict now and then have it returned and you do not make the changes that they request. So this is what you need to communicate, what changes are necessary, and then communicate those up. And you have the choice to make those changes and present them to the board, to this commission, before you go to the planning commission.
Yes, Mr. Peugeot.
I think given that this is taking so long, obviously, it's not resolved, then maybe the easiest thing would be for you to conceptually, or at least schematically, to do some kind of the reductions that Mr. Sharp was outlined, and come back in 2 weeks, and hopefully the agreement continues with the extra commissioner, and then you can move on. Because
Well,
otherwise
what I'd suggest may be really helpful for all of you, because I don't want you to think that I've tried to can these views. We were going to do this time, but if we plan this for the next time, we can set up the model so that you can ask for any view you want from any vantage point to understand what you're going to see. And, we can walk through the project and we can look at every 10 feet along Victoria if it helps. I think that's certainly the important thing that I want to be able to communicate, that I think a project like this needs a little bit of two stories. You want to be able to maybe see that Arlington come in and out of view, and that you're maintaining the streetscape, and maybe that would help you, and then we can look at some of the tweaks. I think Don was very clear as far as what he was expecting, so we can look at that. I don't think I'm going to ever figure out, Suzette, what your issue is, but I'm confident. I'm absolutely confident, as I said, that the biggest mistake here would be to make this a urban housing solution that becomes a large building, as opposed to the feeling that it is
I'm not saying a large
smaller
building at all.
buildings. Okay.
Not at all.
Okay. Well.
No.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And
Sorry. There's just one other. I don't believe you did the straw vote architectural character of the city and neighborhood, if it's compatible with that. Did you do that?
That was my last
okay.
one. The straw vote is, do the commissioners find this project to be compatible with the character of the city and the neighborhood?
Yeah, I did.
Compatible with.
1, 2, 3, 4.
oh, come on, Fermina. Trust me.
I'm not, what was I just
Architectural character is compatible.
Right up there.
It's up here. It's laminated, and so that you can refer to it.
with the neighborhood?
The city and the neighborhood compatible with the desirable architectural qualities and characteristics which are distinctive of Santa Barbara and of the particular neighborhood surrounding.
I think generally it is.
Conceptually.
So can you please re-vote if you're changing your vote?
I'll ask for that vote again.
So Fermina, do you agree then? So it's actually 6? Thank you.
It was so hard for her.
It's hard. It's really hard.
Trust me, Fermina.
We talk about honesty, and so let's really put it on the table.
Okay.
If you're asking me and you say, okay, what do you want to do with this? I would say, you got to do something to open these parts to have a sense of this housing is part of this urban design. I don't see that. And Callum just handed me this part from our guidelines, and I would read it because I think it's really appropriate for this. It says, private paseos can serve as walkways that connect the public sidewalk to interior open plazas, courtyards, gardens, and outdoor dining areas. This part, to me, is not neighborhood compatible. To me, it's not compatible.
I have a paseo here. I have a plaza that connects to paseos here. That distance is 200 feet, half of a block.
And the back.
I have 2 paseos. I have a paseo. I'm creating a paseo here that's in the paseo master
And
plan.
that's open to the public.
Absolutely. It's all open to
The only thing that isn't open to the public is the internal courtyard, which is, it's accessed by an elevator from the garage for the residents only, and that's for security purposes. But all of this, and, maybe it
And
would be
this.
a good idea to put a landscape plan down so that you can see how those paseos.
Well, we're done with it. I just wanted to be clear
Sure.
I don't think we should be required to open another paseo up in a distance of 200 feet. I think that we have a mid-block paseo here, and we're creating another one here with a plaza in one city block. And we're connecting and we're connecting to it.
It's intended for people
And we're enhancing it.
to drive them up to the front of the Arlington for the symphony.
Really?
Things like that.
I'm going to look for a motion because I think we're straw voted out.
I'm straw voted out.
I am.
Would bringing the real-time model in be helpful? Not helpful?
I think it would be.
Okay.
I'm assuming it would be.
I strongly feel that the comments about that Commissioner Sharp made were very specific.
Madam Chair.
But not everyone.
Not everyone
Right.
agreed. Yeah,
So-
that's true.
Yes.
Because I have the 3 comments that were made, but I'm not really sure if I should include them. Should I go over them and see?
Well, I'm looking for a motion, and the motion may include the comments if it wishes. You want, follow on your consistent
Yes,
path.
Alex, please.
No, I think Mr. Sharp should make the motion, and I think it'll be appropriate thing.
Well, the motion should be for a 2-week continuance for the applicant to
Try to make you happy.
listen to what we've all been saying and make a set of drawings that could be approved in 2 weeks, based on the and the model, of course, but based on reducing the amount of 3-story in the center section, reducing the 3-story straight facade on the east and probably the west end that face the paseo and the courtyard, or the 2 paseos, we'll say, and to reduce the amount of 2-story that is on the sidewalk, which would help open up just more views to the building, the Arlington.
Do I have a second?
And then, how about
Pardon?
how about the bridge? Any comments about that?
I think a bridge is a design detail that
Okay,
I
got you.
that bridge, as proposed, does not belong with this set of buildings, in my estimation. But that's another day.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So
Do I
I'll
have a
second?
second?
If nobody has.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I will oppose it. I think the 2-story element on Victoria Street
Perfectly fine.
Abstain? And if I can ask, when you bring the model, will you keep this model as it is, make a copy and make another model? I would like to see this as well, because it may be that the changes you make will not be better.
Okay.
And that's very possible.
Just for clarification, the Victoria comments, could you repeat? I'm not sure I understand what. Are we looking to reduce the 2-story on Victoria? Or are we looking to break it apart?
Yeah. I think your slide of the is it the Virginian Hotel or whatever it is?
Well,
on
it
the
was.
east
No,
side?
it's Victoria Hotel.
Victoria Hotel.
Yeah.
That's a very powerful building, and emulating that just by itself, it's marvelous. But tying it into all this other stuff going around it would dilute the power that building has. And I think reducing some roof height or going to 1.5 stories or something that could allow more view corridors through that 100-foot section would help.
But I have to be one story to allow any view corridor. I hope my presentation made that clear.
It made it very clear.
Okay.
But a story and a half.
Story and a half, you lose the view.
You do, but you at least break up, in my estimation, the building block that is there blocking the view. But we can't sit here and design it, obviously. So it's.
I would like to be very. I would like to be very candid with this commission, because we can keep coming back, and some of you want it taller, and some of you want it lower, and if the suggestion is that we remove units by removing the two-story element on Victoria Street, and we remove units by removing three-story elements, we don't have a project. And so I want to be very candid with you. And if your choice is not to, look at this, it may not be completely what you would want at the end of the day, but it's 40 feet, and it sits next to this historic landmark and is sensitive. You all voted that we are being sensitive to this building. I urge you to think about what you can support, because I'm being very honest. If we remove 6 units, we don't have a project. If we remove 2 units, we have a project. Yesterday in our meeting, when I was in San Francisco with our team, I said that if we lose 1 square foot of commercial and we lose any units, we don't have a project. And I wasn't being theatrical for them. I was telling them quite honestly what's happening. But I want you to know that we have really worked to create a project that works with the Arlington Theater. And you want me to take stories up. You want me to have a 1-story building and a 2-story building next to this 85-foot building. We don't have a project. So, I think what will be productive for the commission is for us to bring our model and show you the various view corridors so that we can see it and not think about what it is, but really look at it in the model.
And as I say, I'd like to see this one
Yes.
as well as the adjusted
Right.
one.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you.